All right. Looks like we're live. We'll wait for some people to trickle in here, but super excited about today's presentation with Autumn. It's going to be amazing.
Yay.
Yay. Hey, everybody. As soon as you come in, leave a little comment in the chat so that we can see that you're here. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We can give you a little shout out while we're giving a couple minutes for everybody to join us. All right, we've got Julie, hello, Coco from San Francisco, Dar from SoCal. We got a lot of California peeps in the house. Scott from Virginia, Alex from Portland, Oregon. Amazing. Thank you guys for being here. Christy, Seattle, Susan from North Carolina, Julie from France. Okay. Lucia from Spain, Adriana, Croatia, Dave from Springfield, Oregon. Amazing. People from all over. That's what I always love about doing these workshops online, is that people from literally every part of the world join us. And I think that's just such a cool thing. Okay, well, I know we've got a bunch of people here already, so I'm going to introduce our very special guest with you. Her name is Autumn Witt Boyd, and she is an attorney, and she helps online entrepreneurs. She helps a lot of different people with her legal practice. And she's also been working with my business and getting some amazing results for any legal things that come up for us. So she was the first person that we thought of when we thought, oh my goodness, I have no idea what GDPR is, and I need some help personally. And then we started hearing from my students and our community, and just hearing that there is a whole mess of confusion about this topic, and for good reason. It's kind of confusing, and there's a lot of components to it. So thought, what better than to bring in an amazing attorney who can really spell it out for all of us, including myself, and make sure that we understand how to make sure that our websites are working properly with these new privacy data laws. So I'm going to pass it over to Autumn. She's got an amazing presentation to teach us all about GDPR. And then if you've got questions, feel free to shout them out throughout the presentation. And then we'll be doing some Q&A at the end of the workshop in case anything is unclear, you've got some specific questions. So Autumn, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for inviting me. When you reached out and said that you had some GDPR questions, I immediately thought that if you had them, probably everybody else did also.
Yeah.
It's really fun to put together. Yeah, I'm going to turn on my PowerPoint. Get it launched. Hopefully this will work. Okay, and everything I have here is going to be directed to US websites, but I know we have an international crowd here today. And because I'm a lawyer, of course, I always try and stay, making it really clear what I can and can't talk about. So a lot of this will still apply, even if you are in the EU or in other countries, but this is kind of a buyer beware. Make sure you talk to someone who knows the laws of your country if that is an issue for you.
And Autumn, real quick, maybe other people can chime into the chat. I'm not seeing your slides. It looks like a blank screen to me. Oh. Do you want to try resharing?
Yeah, I'll hit stop sharing and then we'll try again. And if not, I can just talk.
Sounds good.
All right. Are they showing now?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, great. So just my general legalese, my disclaimer that I give every time. This is not legal advice. This is information. If you have specific questions, definitely talk with a lawyer or an advisor so that you get the right answers for your business. And everything is based on our initial interpretation of this EU regulation for US businesses. But this is really early. This law has not even gone into effect yet. So things are changing quickly. And I'm licensed to practice law in Tennessee. I'm a licensed attorney. So that's you go, my legalese. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to go over what is GDPR, who has to comply, so whether you need to do anything, what can happen if you don't comply, can you use technology or make certain decisions in your business to avoid complying. I'll kind of briefly go over all the major changes, and then I want to talk about the two biggest changes that I see for online businesses, digital marketers, creative small businesses, which is most of what you guys here are. Melyssa, tell me if I'm missing anyone.
You got it.
That's the kind of businesses I mostly work with. So these are the two biggest changes I think we need to pay attention to, which is changing your opt-in forms, any contact me forms on your website and any email opt-ins, you're going to have to change. And then dealing with cookies. So if you're using Facebook ads with the Pixel, or if you're using Google Analytics, there's also some things we're going to need to change there. And I'll outline some easy steps you can take ASAP. So a little background on me. Hi, I'm Autumn. Just wanted to let you know who I am and why you should pay attention, why you should listen to me. So I've been a lawyer for almost 14 years. I went to Vanderbilt for law school, graduated at the top of my class, worked for a judge, worked for different law firms. And I spent almost 7 years working for a boutique law firm doing copyright infringement lawsuits. So I represented mostly photographers. And that's where I really got started working with creative business owners and just kind of fell in love with the kind of work these kind of businesses are doing, and had a really fun time advising them. The law firm was virtual, so that was also kind of my entree into this virtual business world. I'm located in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You can see my pictures on one of our walking bridges. But my boss was located in Philadelphia. I had another boss in Colorado. So we worked virtually just like many of you do with the virtual team. So that kind of opened my eyes to how a business like that can work. I became a mom in 2011, and that changed the way I looked at work. I still loved the work. I didn't want to quit, but I figured out that, I had to work in a different way. So in 2015, I started my own law firm. So about 3 years ago. And I don't go to court very often anymore. We work with creative and online businesses, just like you. And we work online. I have 2 other attorneys who work with me, a paralegal and assistant. We all work virtually. Our mission, which I have here, we provide innovative legal services with integrity and joy so that ambitious entrepreneurs like you can grow profitable businesses and create the life of their dreams. So just a little background on what I'm going to do in this presentation today. My job as a lawyer is always to kind of lay out what the law is, so tell you the rules, and then help you figure out the pros and cons and how you can actually decide whether you need to comply with those rules, whether you can do something different, or whether you maybe want to evaluate the risk and decide that you don't want to comply with the rules. I can't ever tell my clients what to do. It's their decision, and I'm just kind of a guide. I help them figure out the best choice to make. So we're going to talk a lot today about risk tolerance. So that's kind of something to keep in the background. So what is GDPR? This is a regulation that the EU has passed. I've included the link here, and we can hand that out afterwards too if you want to dig into all of the actual language. It is complicated. The law itself is 50 pages long. The regulations are another 100 pages. So we are not going to cover it all today. But I'm going to try and give you as much of an overview as I can. And a little background that I think helps frame this conversation. So the EU had 3 goals when they passed this GDPR. They are wanting to really protect individuals' privacy rights. So this is ensuring security, confidentiality, notice, choice, right of access. These are all the things we're going to be talking about. They want to give more control over your data to individuals. They also needed to update privacy laws. A lot of these laws had not been updated in 20 years, so they were just out of date. And then they wanted to standardize the laws in all the EU countries. Previously, there were 28 different laws. So if you're in the EU, it's very difficult to figure out how to comply with all the different laws. So this is the main question I've been getting. Who has to comply? And my overall impression and recommendation is almost any company with a website, no matter where you're located, probably has to comply with the GDPR. So any business that is dealing with personally identifiable data is going to have to comply if you touch the EU. So the key word here is processing, and that can mean collecting data, using data, storing data, and even receiving data from other companies. So it can be another company collecting the data, but you get it. Any personally identifiable data, you are going to have to look at whether you have to comply with the GDPR. So there's 2 categories that I'm going to kind of separate this in. If you're doing business with EU residents, you clearly have to comply. And the thing to think about is, where is the person who's sending you the data sitting when they send you that data? So even if it's an American citizen, if they're sitting in the EU or a citizen of another country, you have to comply with the GDPR. That's clear. If you're selling them products, if you're sending them something, if you're providing services, clearly have to comply. This second category is a little more gray. If you are collecting or processing anything that could come from EU residents or be connected to the EU, you probably should comply. And so this is what I think a lot of us fall into, where we're not really sure if we have anyone on our email list. We know our customers, we know they're not in the EU, but could we have somebody who downloaded an opt-in, maybe, who could be in the EU? So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. The other thing is that we have to think about here is it's hard to know who is in the EU. So when we talk about some of the tech tools that we might think about, I want you to keep in mind that it's not always clear. So this is the next. Yeah, Melyssa.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about this, I'm guessing, but this would apply if you have like a checkout form where you're collecting money from somebody, or an opt-in form where you're getting an email address, pretty much anything where you're collecting information from.
Exactly. Yeah, anything that's personally identifiable. So that could be even just a name and an email address.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it doesn't have to be paid. So it could be something free, like an email opt-in or something like that.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So can you use tech to avoid complying with GDPR? And I actually, just before I got on the call, I didn't have time to look into it, but I saw a large company, the Unroll.me, is basically saying they don't want to comply with the GDPR, so they're just not going to deal with EU residents. So that is an option. I don't recommend it. And again, I'm framing this, my risk tolerance, because I'm a lawyer, is very, very low. So you may have a different risk tolerance, and obviously they have a different risk tolerance. But some things to think about when you're figuring out if you can use technology to avoid complying. So the GDPR actually prohibits profiling based on location. So if you are using an IP address or something to block people from your site, that in itself violates the GDPR. So we've got a problem there. If you're relying on an IP address, let's say you are segmenting your list, or you're using different technology on your website, relying on an IP address to tell where your visitors are coming from, it can be really inaccurate. So that can be a problem. We have, you can bounce IP addresses. It's just not 100% accurate. And we're going to talk about some penalties in a minute that are going to show why it's really important to get this right, because there's some pretty big risks. The third is asking if the person resides in the EU is risky because it's not the right question. You really need to know where they're sitting when they give you the data. So you could ask, let's say if I, for example, go to a conference in Paris and I'm working on the airplane and I'm sitting in my hotel room in Paris doing some work, and I log into a website, and they ask me if I'm an EU resident. I'm not, but I'm sitting there when I'm transmitting data. And so you could have, contact with people where you're getting information, even if you ask that question. And then the last one is, this is just kind of shows it's unclear right now how this is going to apply because it hasn't actually gone into effect yet. But there's this question about data anchored in the EU, whether that falls under the GDPR. So think about if you have a phone number and, a lot of us have phone numbers from prior addresses because now we all keep our cell phone numbers for forever. So same thing could happen in the EU. You could have a phone number based in one location, but you move to another location. Same thing with an email address. And this is a big question that I have is in Chattanooga, we have a lot of companies that are headquartered in the EU. We have a Volkswagen plant. We have some other big manufacturers. It's unclear, like if a US Volkswagen employee is using a Volkswagen email, is that an EU email or is that a US email? I feel like here we have a lot more questions than we have answers about how we could avoid complying. So for me, when I look at the risk, if I wanted to treat EU data differently, I would have to manually confirm it with that person. I would have to trust that they're being truthful, that they're not lying, because maybe they know that I'm going to bounce them from my site if they say they're in the EU and they really want to get to my site. And that no data that they're giving me could potentially be anchored in the EU, even if they're not physically located there. So my recommendation is that we just assume that we're all dealing with people in the EU in our businesses. Unless you are a local pizza shop and you are pretty darn sure that you are never getting anyone from the EU interacting with your website, I think that it just is the best practice to assume that you're going to have to comply. And the good news is it's not that hard for most of our businesses. So I think we can all take a deep breath. We probably have to comply, but it's also not that hard. For different kinds of businesses, it is hard to comply. So I would say if you're a SaaS company or if you're a very large corporation, my guess is we don't have a lot of those on our call today, so I'm not going to get into that. But if you are a bigger business or you are processing a lot of data, that's going to be a different analysis, and you definitely need to talk with your legal advisor and make the right decision. But I'm kind of talking to our online and creative crowd today. So what happens if you don't comply? What are the penalties? They are pretty serious. So 20 million euros, that's a crazy amount of money, or 4% of your gross annual worldwide income, which is probably going to be a lot less than 20 million euros, but could still be a pretty big chunk of change. There is a big question about whether, European countries are actually going to come after United States citizens. And I think that's a valid question. I don't know that they're going to do that, but we have what's called a private right of action in the GDPR. And that means that individuals can also file a lawsuit if their data is breached or if they have some sort of damage from their data being used in ways that they didn't want it to be used. So it's not just a question of whether the government is going to come after you. You could have some crazy person in the EU who decides to sue you, and that's a much bigger problem. So it's not clear at this point. Again, we've got a lot more questions than answers about how they would actually file a lawsuit in the United States or how they would actually come after you. But they do intend to enforce it. So I'm going to just read something on the EU GDPR website, which is that the GDPR not only applies to organizations located within the EU, but also organizations located outside the EU if they offer goods or services to or monitor the behavior of EU data subjects. And that monitoring gets to what we're going to talk about with like the Facebook Pixel and Google Analytics. It applies to all companies processing and holding the personal data of subjects residing in the EU, regardless of the company's location. So it's very clear they intend to enforce it outside the EU. We don't really know how. And again, it's up to you what steps you want to take. You've got to evaluate your own risk tolerance and how much contact you're really having with EU people. So I'm going to go over just really quickly the major changes. So the biggest one is affirmative consent. So up to this point, most of us, if we are using email marketing and we're doing list building, we're trying to get people onto our email list, we might have an opt-in on our website where we say, sign up to get, my GDPR checklist. And then we add them to our email list after they get that. That's not going to work going forward. You have to have an affirmative consent, and we'll talk about that more. If you use cookies, again, you've got to have affirmative consent. You've got to have an opt-in. So you may have seen, if you're cruising around the web, you're starting to see these pop up where there's a banner or there's something that says, this website uses cookies, click here to see what we do with them. And you have to like check a box or close it out or do something. You have to tell people how you'll use their information. And this is going to require that you're posting your privacy policy in a lot more places. So privacy policy is going to become a lot more important. You have to keep your data secure. So you can't just leave it laying around, and you've got now some due diligence requirements where you've got to make sure your vendors are doing the right thing. You have to give notice if you find out that there's been a data breach. So you have 72 hours. It's really fast. If you find out that someone has gotten your username and login and gotten access to all of your people's information, you've got to report it. There are all kinds of new rights for individuals. They can request their data. They can ask that you erase their data. This is the right to be forgotten. There's a new right to request correction of their data if they think that you have incorrect data. And there's a new right to withdraw their consent for you to hold their data. Your privacy policy has to be written in really clear and plain language. There's special rules if you're gathering information from kids. It has to be especially clear. Bigger companies are going to have to appoint a data protection officer. There's lots of new rules for them. And then there is this new potential exposure where you could be sued if one of your vendors who's handling your data, so that could be like your email list provider, your ConvertKit, or your MailerLite or MailChimp, all of those, if they are not compliant, you could now have the potential to be sued there. So it is pretty serious. But here's what I want to really talk about. And I would love to get Melyssa's questions and input as I'm going through this about how this is really going to work. So we call these lots of things: freebies, lead magnets, list building. And I've got an example on the next page that I'll show. But the thing to know is that you can no longer do a bait and switch. You have to get affirmative consent for the exact way that you are going to use the data. So if you are going to add them to your newsletter list, you have to tell them that, and they have to agree. If you're going to send them coupons, you have to tell them that, and they have to agree, and on and on and on and on. You cannot pre-check the boxes, and you can't do what a lot of businesses are doing now, which is gather data in the beginning and then figure out a way that you can use it to make money later by selling it to somebody else or analyzing it or doing different things. And this is something that is causing a lot of people anxiety, but I think is not as big a deal as many are worried. You may need to get new consent from people who are on your email list right now. So you may need to do a re-engagement campaign and clean your list, because if you had added them before GDPR takes effect and you didn't do all of these things, your consent is no good. So you basically have to kind of get them all back up to speed. So I'm going to give an example. Here's my website. We are not compliant today, but we're working on it. This is what not to do. So you can see the red circle at the bottom. I have an opt-in on my front page. It says, get this 5-minute copyright and trademark audit. Give me your email address. This will not work. So we're changing this. Here are 3 ways that you can do this. This is not the only ways, but these are kind of the 3 main ways that I think most people should think about it. So the first one is, this is my client Braid Creative. This is a great example. You can just tell them you're signing up for a newsletter. So this is, there's no freebie, there's no incentive. It's just basically you are signing up for our newsletter. And I want to point out, this is one of the places where you're going to need to post a link to your privacy policy. So all of your forms, that's going to be a change that you need to make. The privacy policy has to be available at the place that you are collecting the information. So this is a great example of one way to comply. You're being very upfront. You're telling them exactly what you're going to do with their data. You're getting their consent. The second example, this is from IBM's website. I stumbled on this when I was doing my GDPR research, and I thought it was so great. So they have like a brief or a white paper that you can download. They ask for all kinds of information. And then they say, please keep me informed of product, service, and offerings. So it's clear you're not just getting this one thing. You're getting information about products, services, and offering. And it can be from IBM companies worldwide. So you have to be really specific. Is it just going to be, are you just going to be using their data? Or do you have sister companies that are going to use their data? You have to let people know. You have to be really specific. So it says, check the boxes below to receive more information about. And again, this pre-checked box I think is okay because it's clear what they're agreeing to. But this second box has to be unchecked. I would like to receive information about other IBM products. So your general rule is that box needs to be unchecked if it's not clear what they're signing up for. And then again, we've got down here, I accept IBM's privacy statement. And then you click here to submit. So this is a really good example of just how specific you can be. The third example, which I don't have a screenshot for, but you all should know what it is to do a double opt-in. Now, this isn't required. You can do this through the checkbox or through being really specific and telling people exactly what they're getting. But using a double opt-in, which is where you get their email address, and you could still have one like my first one. Like this will work if you're using a double opt-in. So they get the first email and you say, maybe you provide the thing, the freebie, the download, and you say, click on this link to join our newsletter, or click on this link to get updates about legal information or whatever you're doing. That's okay if you're doing a double opt-in. So again, double opt-in, not required, but it's one of the choices.
So quick question, you gave the example of Braid Creative. I noticed they didn't have a checkbox. They just had a link to the privacy policy. And you said that that's okay to do it?
Yeah, so because with this one, it's so clear exactly what they're going to do with your email address. You're signing up for their newsletter. So you don't really need a checkbox. Yeah.
You're saying like if somebody says, sign up for my free checklist about blah, 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 but doesn't mention that you're also going to be added to their email list, that is a violation.
Yeah, you need a separate checkbox in that instance.
So if you are
or double opt-in, you've got to get their consent somehow.
Oh, I see. So it could be that they're opting in, getting the free checklist, and then they're going in to their email and seeing like, to get this and information from our newsletter, like click this link to opt in.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically. Okay. That makes sense. And you also have to link to the privacy policy right next to the opt-in form?
Yeah, it should be on all your forms. So another one I didn't do a screenshot of, but a lot of us have contact us forms on our website. So that's another place where you're gathering, it's not necessarily opting into your email list, but if you're gathering personal information so that you can get in touch with someone, you need your privacy policy linked there too.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And just a quick question I see from Brittany saying, can you clarify a double opt-in? So a double opt-in from my understanding, is they opt in for your email list, but anybody could just put anyone's email address into an opt-in form. So you don't necessarily know that that person opted in. So they opt in for your email list, and then they get an email from you saying like, hey, to confirm your opt-in, to confirm your registration, click this link. That would be a double opt-in.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I see a lot of questions coming in too. And just so you guys know, I'm collecting all of the questions in a document and we're going to answer all of them at the end. So if I see any that are clarifying something we're talking about right now that we need to answer ASAP, I'll give those to Autumn. But otherwise, just know that I'm collecting your questions and we'll answer them at the end. Thank you, Autumn.
Yeah, no problem. So something else to think about is it has to be really easy to withdraw your consent. So if you're using one of the major email providers, this is going to be very easy because they're going to include an unsubscribe link on every email. So this would mainly be if you're doing some sort of personal campaign where you're not using a provider, but most of us are using providers that are going to make that really easy. But that there has to be a way that they can tell you, I don't want you to use my data anymore. And then the last thing I want to talk about is whether you need to get consent from everyone on your current list. So I don't think you need to get consent from everyone, but if you do, most email providers with the GDPR change are providing some resources where you can do some geolocation, figure out where the people on your list live. As I mentioned, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but I think for this, where it's somebody who's engaged with you prior to GDPR, I think getting most of the way there is going to be as good as you can do. So that's what I would recommend, is that you try and figure out who's on your list and where do they come from. If you can't tell, I would go ahead and let's put them in the bucket of we think they might be in the EU. So I would err on the side of let's go ahead and ask them to re-engage. And so what a re-engagement campaign is, it's just you're trying to get people to confirm that they want to stay on your list. So this is for people, you could segment it so you're only getting the people who are in the EU or might be in the EU. And if you were using some of these tactics that we've all been using for a long time, not getting the kind of consent that's required now, you are going to need to get their consent again. So that can be by sending them an email that says, hey, to stay on my list, click this link, or to keep getting the valuable information and discounts that I provide to my list, click here. And you can do that in a series of emails. You can make it lighthearted. It doesn't have to be super serious. But I would say, as of May 25th, if you can't confirm that someone is outside of the EU and you haven't gotten them to say that they want to stay on your list with some affirmative consent, I do think that those need to be deleted. For most US companies, hopefully that's going to be a pretty small percentage of your list. Because I know there's this terror that we've all spent all this time and energy and money building our list and we're going to lose them. And I don't think that's true. I think you can kind of segment, and it's hopefully going to be a small percentage of your list that you have to do this re-engagement with. Melyssa, do you talk about re-engagement campaigns? Is that something that you recommend just in general?
Yeah, I've talked about it before. I'm not sure that I mention it in my courses since they don't focus so much on that. But yeah, if you want to talk a little bit more about what goes into it, from my understanding, we've actually been working on something like this too, but basically just creating a kind of value-based campaign, an email sequence for your subscribers that you send to them. I'm sure for you, it would be sending, I guess, to all of your subscribers, or maybe just the ones that are in the EU, but sending them a bunch of emails over the next 2 to 3 weeks and trying to get them to click something to opt in or confirm that they want to stay. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, just with this GDPR compliance, it needs to be really clear that they are staying on your list. And if you've got different lists you use for different things, you need to tell them that. So if you've got like one that's marketing and one that is purely information, you'd want to split that out so that they can tell you which one they want to be on. You have to let them know exactly what you're going to be doing with their data and get their affirmative consent. I'm going to move on to the next critical change, which is cookies. So if you
really quick, actually, sorry to cut you off. There's a bunch of questions.
Pause here.
Yeah, maybe let's pause here for a second. I think there's a good amount of questions just on that section, so it might be helpful to clarify that for people. So I'll just kind of go through some of the questions we've gotten on what you just talked about. So Karina says, are there any requirements for what we say in the double opt-in? Any certain language that we need them to agree to?
No, it should be clear, unambiguous. Let me see where the language is of what exactly it needs to say. Freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. So
Okay.
it just needs to be easy to understand that they want to get emails from you. I think that's the big thing.
Okay. So making sure that they know that they're signing up for a newsletter, not just like a workbook.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. Coco had a question kind of similar. Do we have to use the word newsletter? Is there another word? I would say no,
update,
right?
like whatever or if you have a special name for it, I mean, it can be whatever. Or if it's not regular, like I know a lot of people don't necessarily have a weekly newsletter, but they send things out every now and then. So
right. Basically just letting them know they'll be subscribed to getting emails from you. Yeah. Okay. Kalita says, so building your list with Facebook ads by giving a freebie won't really work anymore. Is that true?
It will work. But, and there may be some tweaking you need to do in your Facebook ads. So it says, you know, get this free workbook and updates or something like that. Like that's something we're kind of playing around with on my site, is to figure out how to say it.
That makes sense.
You're doing both things.
Exactly. Okay. So bottom line here, everybody, is just make sure that it's really clear that if you're giving away something for free, they're also going to be signed up for your email list in general. I think that's kind of the big point here. Okay, let's see.
And I would say the other thing, like if you're selling products or digital things, or you have a checkout process, like they're buying courses, you can't automatically add them to your list there either. Like that would be another place you would want to disclose, you know, and have a checkbox that's not checked. Like, yes, please send me updates or helpful information or however you want to phrase it.
Right. Okay. So did you get that, you guys? So if it's a student that's signing up for something or a customer who's buying something, they also have to agree to get emails from you. You can't just add them to your email list.
You can use their information however you have to like process their order. That's fine. Like sending shipping confirmations and stuff. That's fine.
Right.
But beyond that, once it starts to get into marketing or other things, you've got to get their consent.
Perfect. Okay. Sophia says, so is a double opt-in, the thing where you get the second email telling them to confirm their subscription, is that not required if you are specifically saying subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to get updates from me via email?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So if you put that, everyone, if you put that into your opt-in form, then you don't need to have the double opt-in necessarily. Okay. And Dana, just to clarify here, she said, what exactly has to be in the first email for double opt-in? Does it need to have checkboxes or just click to agree?
Yeah, excuse me. Usually it's just click to it. Click to, mine has like a really big button that says confirm subscription or something like that.
Perfect. Okay. And yes, so just to confirm, Sherry, she said, can you say that if you want my free thing, you also have to agree to be on my email list? And the answer is yes, essentially.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a tricky area. Like you're not supposed to require that they give you data to provide something to them.
Got it. So they could just sign up and get the free thing and say, no, I don't want to be on your email list.
Yeah, that's why that's why the double opt-in is a nice option, is they can still get the thing. Yeah. Or a checkbox yeah.
And Jeff says, what about comments on a blog? Do they need the privacy policy link there as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So include your privacy policy link there. They don't need to checkbox anything.
I was about to say some blogs or some services like require that you give them your name and email address.
Right.
So that's another area where if you were using that for anything, you'd have to tell them and get their consent.
Okay. Makes sense.
I assume all these apps are getting, like I've gotten a ton of emails about how all my apps are being updated. So I think I'm working on it.
Okay. Makes sense. Leanne says, I'm at the moment building my list by asking people like friends on Facebook if they want to join my newsletter. I get many email addresses. Is that okay because they just give me their email address and then I add them to my MailChimp list?
Yes. Because you have their consent. They know what they're getting. I would say the only trick there is under GDPR, you have a requirement to have a record of their consent. So
like a screenshot.
Yeah, like that's what I was about to say. A screenshot is the best thing I can think of, but if you're getting hundreds of emails, that can be just tricky to manage. So just think about how you might do that.
Got it. Ella has a really good question here. That's kind of something that's on my mind too. I get a roughly, she said, 20% open rate when I send an email. So if I have to send a compliant consent form to my existing list, does this possibly mean that I lose 80% of my current email list?
Hopefully not. I think this is part of why when we talk about screening your list, we want to do a campaign. It shouldn't just be one email. And those subject lines should be really clear. So, maybe it's a little softer in the beginning, and then the last couple of emails are like, if you want to stay on my list, please read this, or you will be deleted if you do not, so that you catch their attention more than maybe something that's more informational would. And I think you'll see your open rates go up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The bottom line is we're probably all going to lose some subscribers from this.
Yeah, but it's probably going to be people who weren't engaged anyway. So,
okay.
That's the silver lining. Maybe all of us will end up paying less on our email subscriptions.
Yeah. There you go.
Our list will shrink, but it will be people who weren't opening anyway.
Right. I like that outlook. Okay. So got some more questions here. Luke says, how does this work on Facebook? I know that on Facebook, there's two types of things. There's one where you could send them to a landing page where obviously you'd want to just implement what we're talking about here by having either the checkbox, privacy policy, or sending them to a double opt-in. Or I know that Facebook also has ads where you can just click a link and sign up. It already has your information in there. So I'm assuming that Facebook is going to be adding compliance for GDPR. Is that the case?
Yeah, actually, Facebook has a really good resource on complying with GDPR for advertisers. If you just Google Facebook GDPR, it'll show up.
Okay, cool.
The link handy. But there's one version for developers and there's one for advertisers. So kind of depending on which side of the coin you're working on.
Perfect.
But and the trick with Facebook is that Facebook is processing some of the data and you're processing some of the data. So it's a little bit more tricky.
Right.
If you never get the data, then it's not really a problem if they're just going to your form.
Right.
And Facebook keeps the data. So this is an example of where if you're doing more advanced things in your business in this area, you really need to sit down and consult with somebody who can help you figure this out. So, because there's no one answer for everybody.
Right. Okay.
It's going to depend on the exact apps that you're using. It's going to depend on your exact Facebook ad campaign. This is going to be an ongoing discussion.
Right. Okay. This might be a similar answer then, but Luke also said, how does this work with Facebook Messenger bots?
So the data really lives on Facebook, but then if you're copying it and taking it, and I don't use bots, so I'm not sure exactly how the information goes from one to the other.
Yeah, I'm not crazy familiar with them myself. I do know that you collect the subscriptions on a separate site. So that might be
collecting. Yeah, so then wherever that happens would be where you really need to be concerned.
Got it. So you would potentially inside of the bot be just saying you're going to be subscribed to this bot kind of thing.
Yeah, it's hard to say without knowing exactly how it works.
Right. Okay.
And if he wants to provide more information, I'm happy to think about it.
Yeah, sure. And Autumn did mention that there's a resource that Facebook created, so hopefully that's helpful too. And Christina, yes, this is my understanding. So she said, can we take a two birds with one stone approach and say, sign up for my newsletter and get XYZ freebie? So they're signing up for both at the same time.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, right. Yeah, that works. Okay. So Sophia said, I have a question about challenges. I have an email challenge that lasts for 5 days. Do I still need to get consent for that, even though they opted in for the 5 emails?
So I think as long as it's clear, it's a 5-day challenge, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to add them to your list after the 5-day challenge, being clear that
you'd have to, I think at that point, you'd have to, my assistant and I were just working through this all with a flow chart this morning, same thing. Maybe after the 5-day challenge, you send that double opt-in email where it says, if you want more great information like this, click here to go on my list. And then you have clear consent at that point.
Right. That makes sense. And then Kalita, another quick Facebook ads question said, if we're only targeting people in the US or Canada with Facebook ads, then we don't need these regulations just when we target those in the EU. Based on what you said, Autumn, it doesn't necessarily mean that you live in the EU. It's just that you are in the EU. So you could be a tourist in the EU and the GDPR still applies. So Facebook is pulling your data, I think, from where your location is in your bio. So I don't know that that would work, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I think the way their analytics work is based on that, not your like IP address or physical location.
Right. Okay. Gemma said, I've seen some emails from other companies saying that as a customer, I will remain on their list unless I say otherwise. Is this wrong?
There is no right answer. There are lots of different ways to attack this puzzle. I think that is a little risky. So yeah, I would not recommend it. But, you know, they have made a decision that they would rather keep people on their list than be super compliant with the law. So, you know, we'll see. This is going to be an evolving landscape over the next couple of years as people actually start using it and figuring out how it works.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay. And Sherry said, what is the current state of the UK as GDPR starts since they're leaving the EU?
So right now, they're still part of it. And I think they are going to be implementing this regulation. So even though they're not part of it, they'll have their own kind of version of it. That's my understanding. Is we're going to talk about kind of EU and UK and I should have said that at the beginning. So that's a great question.
Oh, okay, great. I know we have more questions. I'll keep collecting them. Why don't we move on though? And we can keep answering the rest of the questions as we.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So the next big thing is, this was a perfect lead in with all those questions about Facebook ads. So if you are using the Facebook pixel on your website, and for those who aren't using it, this is like a little tiny snippet of code that you or your developer, if you're like me and not very web savvy, will put into your website. And then when visitors come, it puts a cookie into their computer that tracks their movements after they visit your site. So this is really helpful with Facebook ads. You can target only people who have come to your website, or you can target only people who've been to a specific page on your website. So you can say, I only want people who have interest in, let's say, like my contract templates. I don't want people who are interested in trademarks. I only want to talk to these people. So because you are tracking someone else's movements, that's considered personally identifiable data under the GDPR. And you now have to ask people for their affirmative consent to do that. Same thing with Google Analytics. It's a snippet of code that goes on your website, and it's more anonymous. And both of these really are not giving you, someone's name, but it does allow you to track their movements. And so now the GDPR is requiring that you ask them for their consent. This seems like a crazy change, but it's really not that big a deal. And there are lots of apps and plugins and things that will do this on your website. So there's a couple of examples. You can have a pop-up, you can have a banner or a notice, but there has to be some affirmative action that they take that to move past it, that basically gives their consent. And again, that little banner or pop-up or whatever should link to your privacy policy. So I've got an example here. This is a French travel website. I went to an EU website to make sure I got one. And you can see in the red circle at the bottom, this is like a little banner that pops up and it says, by continuing to browse, you are agreeing to the use of cookies. It tells you exactly what they're going to do with them, what the purpose is. They're going to provide web analytics, measure your traffic, behavior, on and on. And then to learn more, click here. So that's their link to their privacy policies where it says click here. And then we've got an X on the right corner. So you can't move past this page or you can't dismiss that banner until you click that X. So that's really important. It's not enough to just have a pop-up that shows up and then goes away. Again, we have to have them do something affirmative to show that they agree. So this is some language that is suggested that you could use in a banner or a cookie, or sorry, a pop-up, things like that. So this is going to be, again, not just the Facebook pixel and Google Analytics. There's lots of other things that I'm not web savvy enough to understand, but anything that uses cookies, and these are the two biggest ones that I feel like almost all of us are using, is critical that you now add this to your website. So have you gotten questions about cookies, Melyssa?
I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still adding all the questions from before. Let me scroll up here and see.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. I don't think I've gotten any cookie questions just yet.
Okay. And another thing to think about is with Facebook ads, if you're using your list or your CRM to create custom audiences on Facebook, that's another use of their personal data, and that's something you need to tell them about. So kind of this is getting back to our list building, but if someone just signs up for your freebie, you have to, and you're going to use them for retargeting, you have to tell them that. Does that make sense? You have to get their affirmative consent. So we're going to have a lot more disclosures with our Facebook ads. And I think most of us understand that, like, this is the new world we live in.
Okay, so let's see if we have some questions here.
Yeah.
Okay, Brittany says, should we have the cookie disclaimer on every page or just as a pop-up on the main page? How would we ensure everyone sees it?
Yeah, it should just be on it should definitely be on your front page. And then ideally it would be on other pages. And I think that the tech will do this for you. Like if someone just goes to another link to your website, but they haven't ever been there before, that it will pop up. And this is only going to require them to dismiss it once, I think is the goal. Like you don't have to have them do it every time. And I think the tech takes care of that.
Got it.
We won't have pop-ups in our face for ever and ever every time we go to a new site.
Right. Do you know, for the cookie banner, do you know of a WordPress plugin that makes the site freeze until they click the cookie banner? Can I say it real quick?
Yeah, it's at the bottom of every slide. It's awbfirm.com, and all the GDPR stuff is housed at this /GDPR.
Perfect. That's helpful.
Easy peasy. And if you get the checklist, which I think you guys are sending out, I have a helpful checklist of how you can comply with GDPR. The link is on that as well.
Perfect.
No opt-in required.
Oh, that's nice of you. You're like, I don't want to have to deal with this collecting their information. I'll just give it to them for free.
This is not a sales webinar. This is education.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Erin says, can this information go on a separate page? For instance, Melyssa has a terms page, disclaimer, etc. Can the cookies and Google Pixel info go on that page? No, it needs to be upfront.
Yeah, it has to be upfront. Okay.
That's
part of this, the whole GDPR is, I think they know everybody's just been throwing all this stuff on their like terms and conditions page, which no one ever reads. And to be real, like probably no one's going to read your privacy policy either. Mm-hmm. But I think the goal is to start, putting it in places where it's more visible, where it's not just hidden in your footer, and people are starting to look at it more. And I think in the EU, there is a definite shift to people wanting more control of their data. We haven't seen that as much in the US yet. So this is a bigger change for us.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Lori says, well, we need to revise our privacy policy to have language that complies with GDPR.
Yeah. So there's some specific things about, you have to tell exactly how you're using it. Pull up my privacy policy part. You have to tell them how they can correct it, how they can request to delete it, how they can opt out. There's all kinds of different things you have to tell them. So yeah, there are some very specific requirements. So that's why it really is probably easiest just to get a template that is recent, that is GDPR compliant. So, and pretty much everybody, like for me, if anybody has bought a privacy policy for me, I'm just sending them the new one as a courtesy. Because it's not big changes, but they are pretty specific. So you want to kind of check all the boxes.
Okay. Just scrolling through the questions here. Kalita said, do I send the re-engagement campaign to just those in the EU? And I believe what we were saying earlier is you don't really know who's just in the EU. So you kind of have to send it to everybody.
Yeah. You can make a decision. That's one of those, what's your risk tolerance? I think for that, since it's people who came in previously, you could maybe be a little more, pushing the limits a little bit. So if it were me, and I think this is what we're going to do, is we're going to use the IP address, even though it's not 100%, it probably gets us 99% of the way there, and just do that re-engagement campaign. Now, moving forward, we're going to treat everybody the same, but looking backwards, we're going to be a little more, a little differently. So yeah, I mean, because again, I mean, we've talked about this, like you probably are going to lose a lot of people. So I think it's okay to be a little more, focused on that. So I would say if anyone in the EU, if you can tell, or if you can't tell, then it probably needs to be everybody. Like if your list provider doesn't provide you with that kind of data.
Right. Okay. And I got a question about like, how would this be enforced? So let's say that somebody subscribes to your email list and then they double opt in or they click a checkbox, but how necessarily would, if let's say the EU or whoever is enforcing this comes after you, how would they enforce it or know that you just tagged those people saying that they confirmed their opt-in or that they actually did it?
Yeah. So what I think will happen is there will be a data breach, and everybody, a lot of data is going to be spread that people don't want. And then they're going to try and figure out, where did it come from? How did this person get it? And then I think at that point they will look back and see, did they follow all these rules the right way? So that's the scenario where I see that it's probably going to come up. There probably will be, for bigger businesses, some more proactive checking up to see, are your forms set up the right way? Are you handling data the right way? But for smaller businesses, I don't see that happening. But we don't know.
Okay.
I was talking with my paralegal today, and she was reminding me about the Napster cases. You guys may remember this, the big copyright cases where people were downloading songs from Napster, and they did sue thousands of individuals, which nobody thought would happen, but they did. And, they got large judgments against them. So it's hard to predict when there is a right, how it's going to be enforced. So this may turn out much ado about nothing. We don't really know. But I'm advising my clients, I don't want them to be the test case as we're figuring all this out.
Right. And you said, you talked a little bit about punishments, and you said that it could be up to 20 million euros. Was that right? Yeah.
Or 4% of your total revenues, or maybe net revenues, I think. So for a business that's smaller, it's not going to be anywhere near $20 million.
Oh, I see. So I think I read that it was 4% or 20 million, whichever one is larger. But I guess for a small company, that's not.
Yeah, and there is also a proportionality analysis that they're going to do. So again, they're going to look at how big your business is. So I don't necessarily think any of us would end up with a $20 million fine.
Right. Okay. So 4% of your profit is what's at stake.
Yes. You're right. It is higher. I'm looking back at my notes.
Whichever one's higher. Yeah.
20 million or 4%, whichever is higher.
So yeah, could be 20 million.
No, hopefully the proportionality, they would see, because that is part of the GDPR, is like, we all have to take steps to protect data, but what Facebook has to do to protect data and what I have to do to protect data, they realize that those are not going to be the same, because of the amount of data and how personal it is and all of those things. Now, if you are dealing with really sensitive data, like let's say you're a medical provider, or you have really some other kind of sensitive information, you're going to have a higher standard. So it's really going to be different for every business.
Right. Okay.
But yes, 20 million euros.
Yeah, that's a pretty big fee.
Yes.
So we have just so many questions coming in. You guys
are
very engaged. I love it. I know this is a very big topic. I'm just going to ask a few more questions. So Bonnie Marie and Bridget say, if I gather business cards at an event and add them to my list, how can I make sure that this is okay?
So I would ask them when you get the business card.
And is that something somebody else asked about, like what kind of proof do we need if we ever were kind of being prosecuted for this? Would that be enough as proof? Like, well, I met them at this conference and they said it was okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it is a little tricky. If you're using, forms and email provider and all of that, that's going to be pretty well documented, because that will all be in the system. If you're switching systems, you might want to think about how you can keep that evidence. And there's probably going to be a way that they can send that to you. But yeah, you might just make a note make a copy of all the business cards you get and put it in a file somewhere. I mean, I always say to think about if you did have to go in front of a judge, you know, how would you be able to prove it? So just think about that. You don't have to like get out your voice recorder and ask them to record it, saying yes. But it is a good idea. Like these are definitely higher standards. Now, again, if you're at a conference in the US, this is probably you're not going to need to worry about it so much. If you're going to an international conference where you're coming in contact with more EU people, it would be more of a concern.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Mark has a quick question. Do we need to have our sites updated by May 25th?
Ideally.
That's when it starts to become enforced, technically.
Yeah. I mean, that's the enforcement date. But I think a lot of us are scrambling. So I'd say do your best.
Right. Okay. Ulrich and Luke asked, where did I put this? Oregon Luce asks, how can we tell people that we'll retarget them in a specific way with Facebook ads? So if you're collecting Facebook pixel data and then retargeting them with ads, is that something that you should just go on the Facebook article that
they may have some advice? I mean, something like this would probably work. I'm looking. Because you're telling people you're going to offers tailored to your interests and share data with or redirect users from third-party websites. I mean, I think when you tell people you're going to give them offers tailored to your interests, and this might be in this, let's see. Yeah, to provide social media features. You might need to tweak this language a little bit more to customize content and advertising. I mean, I think that's basically what you're doing there. You're customizing the advertising they see.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. The third-party website thing. Sorry, I'm so like zombie right now. I'm like trying to read all these questions and get them all into this document. So Christina said, clarification, please, about the 2 birds with 1 stone approach, where you say, sign up for my newsletter and get this freebie. Does this not conflict with the GDPR requirement that we avoid making consent a precondition of a service? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I think this is kind of a gray area and we're going to have to work it out. So I think, you know, you can't say, I don't know. This is one, like, frankly, that we're puzzling with also. Like, how do we do that? And I think it's going to be really careful wording so that it's clear you're agreeing to both things. And it may, once we start seeing how this works, that may turn out not to be a great approach. And we may want to do 2 separate checkboxes. So I think we'll just kind of have to see how it goes and see how it's being enforced.
Right. Okay. It sounds like it froze for a second for some people and they missed the WordPress plugin. So if you missed that, it's called GDPR. And you could also Google, there's probably going to be a lot of other ones out there. So look for GDPR plugins. And I'm sure there's something out there that you can use for Squarespace too. I'm not personally sure about what that is. Autumn, do you know of anything in particular?
I haven't looked at that.
Okay.
And I have no doubt if you Google it that lots of people are taking advantage of this.
Yeah, totally. And then for anyone who's asking about a privacy policy template, Autumn said that she has one on her site. So if you go to her site, you can actually see it in the slide. It's awbfirm.com/GDPR. She's got some templates there too. All right. And then for people saying, could I just use the IP address and then only send emails reconfirming these subscribers if the IP address indicates that they're in the EU? Earlier, Autumn said that that doesn't necessarily work because IP addresses could be incorrect, or people could basically like project that they have a different IP address to make it seem like they have a different one. So it's not something that might completely hold up in court if you had to do that.
You've got to figure out the pros and cons.
Right. All right. Let me see here. Any other questions that stand out? Jennifer said, what if you don't know yet what you'll be doing with their data? I've just started Facebook ads and I'm still working to best understand it. So I haven't played with all the data yet. So there was another question from somebody who said, I'm not selling a course or ebook or other product at this time, but might be selling one later. How do I make sure that I'm compliant if I basically don't know how I'm going to be using their data yet?
Yeah. So the rule is you have to tell them at the time you get their consent exactly how you're going to use it. So you can't ask for it for one thing and then decide to do another thing in a year. Now, I think there are broad categories that you could ask, like, I will send you a newsletter with updates and special offers. Like, I think that's pretty clear that they're going to be getting marketing emails, whether that's for the thing you have today or the thing you have in a year. So, I think you can be kind of broad with the categories. You just need to be clear. With the Facebook, I think that consent with the cookies is pretty broad. So even if you're doing different kinds of Facebook campaigns and things, that cookie, as long as you're using pretty broad language, the cookie consent can give you what you need.
Got it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And maybe just kind of thinking of what are all the things you might do in the future and just kind of include those.
I know. One thing that I did read about is that like getting consent for research and then they end up deciding to use that in a commercial way in the future, like that is definitely not okay. So in that event, you would have to go back and ask for consent again if you're going to start commercially using it. So again, like we've been talking about with a re-engagement campaign or something like that, if you are going to, maybe you're sitting on this trove of incredible data and you want to do something, you've thought of something really cool you can do with it, you are going to need to get their permission and tell them what the really cool thing is that you're going to do with it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. A few people said that they went to your checklist and they tried to download the privacy policy, but it looks like the link might not be working. So we'll make sure to send you guys that link.
Yeah. And if you just go to my website and click on, I think it's Work With Us and then Contract Templates, it's right there. Or this GDPR link. So either one will get you there. Sorry for the broken link.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Luke says, so just to clarify here, Luke, he said, if you made $100,000 in your business, you spent $50,000, so you had $50,000 in profit, a 4% fine is only $2,000 roughly. So not the end of the world. How often are they going to go after 100 to 500K businesses compared to massive multi-million-dollar companies where they would get all the money? So what Autumn was saying earlier is that actually it's not just a 4% fine. It could be up to 20 million, whatever is higher technically. So the up to 20 million is for like billion-dollar companies, essentially, where they can't go past 20 million. But for smaller companies, if you're making less, then they could go up to that maximum technically. And what she was saying too is that it's not necessarily just a 4% fine. It's whatever's higher of those. So 4% or 20 million.
Or somewhere in between is what
maybe somewhere in between. So really, we just don't know. It's kind of, you want to play it safe because who knows what they do or if you become the example.
Right. And again, like you've got to decide your own personal ethics, how there's all kinds of laws and regulations out there that people don't comply with every day. So you've just got to decide what kind of business are you running? What side of the line are you most comfortable on? And how much risk are you willing to take that you can be on the wrong side of that line?
Right. And Sharon said, I've seen this question a few times. Does it seem like the US will eventually adopt these same standards?
So California already has pretty aggressive requirements. We've been talking about a privacy policy a lot. We should all have a privacy policy already because it's required by California law. And most of us are doing business or have somebody on our list from California. So it would not surprise me at all. I don't know that it'll happen in Congress because nothing much is happening in Congress right now. But it would not surprise me at all if California especially starts this trend and then we see different states starting to adopt similar policies. I think especially with the Facebook, the Cambridge Analytica report where, they asked for data that they said they were going to use for a study and then they were actually using it for something totally different. I think people are hyper aware right now of how their data is being used. And I think you're going to see a shift in the US. So that's another thing to think about here is, this is a trend that is only going in one direction. It is probably not going to go in the other direction. So starting to comply with these EU requirements is probably just going to move you in the direction of what's going to happen in the US in the near future.
Right. Yeah. And Louise said AppSumo has a deal right now on their GDPR plugin. So go check out AppSumo if you want to get their plugin. See if I have any other questions. Robin said, what if, I've seen this question a couple of times too, what if we just go back to using a mailing list by mail? So no online communication. Does it still apply if you're sending things in the mail?
So if you're still holding their data in your business, like in a spreadsheet, you still have to get their consent to do that. So if you're, I guess the difference, the way the law is set, I'm just thinking through this as I'm thinking about this question. Even if, like, let's say I contacted my Chamber of Commerce, I can get a mailing list from them. So I'm not contacting the businesses directly who are on that mailing list, but the law covers that. Even if you get information from a third party, you still have to comply with all these requirements. So even if you are compiling your own hard copy mailing list, you still need people's consent before you use their personal information if they're in the EU. Now, for mailing, I'm assuming this is going to be mostly US companies, right? So that's something to think about. Like, not something I would worry about today, but it could be coming down the pike.
Okay. Another plugin that Maria suggested is CookieBot for cookie consent. So if you guys are looking for a plugin for that, that could be a good option. Squarespace, Andrea said, already has an EU cookie banner block. So check that out in your Squarespace account. All right. Okay. I think I can collect some more of the questions. If you have more that you want to share, feel free to move on.
So I'm just going to wrap up with what I think US companies should do now and what companies based in other areas might want to think about too. So the first one is just auditing how you are gathering other people's information. So this is something I'm sitting down to do later today. What kind of plugins are you using on your website? Are you sending out digital downloads? Are you using a mailer? All the different apps, tools, and vendors that you're using in your business, especially if you're shipping physical products. Are you working with people to help you do that with fulfillment? You just need to kind of take a hard look at what's going on in your business, and that will help you figure out what you need to do to comply with GDPR. Second is evaluate all of your forms. This is what we've been talking about, your opt-ins, your landing pages, contact form, and make sure that you're setting them up the right way to get that affirmative consent. For your current list, we want to think about a re-engagement campaign. Again, it's up to you. You can segment that out to the EU. Slightly more risky, but I think that's probably okay. And then do that re-engagement campaign, delete anyone who doesn't re-engage so that your list, is got the right consents. We talked about adding a cookie notice, updating your privacy policy, adding links on all of your forms. And I think the form, like all of our vendors are updating this. Like I use ConvertKit, and they now have a way to really easily put a link to the privacy policy on all of my opt-in forms. So, everybody's trying to work on compliance, and hopefully your providers are making this easy. And then the last thing that I want to mention, we talked about the potential for damages, that those could be really, really high. So, for a lot of online businesses, when they come to me and they ask if they need an LLC or if they need to form a corporation, and we do the cost benefit analysis, oftentimes we were finding that they didn't really need the protection because there wasn't much they could be sued for, or their risk was pretty low. I think this changes that conversation because there is now a lot more risk if you are handling other people's data. Now you've got this whole other thing that's out there. So if you're handling other people's data, I think it's now going to be worth going ahead and forming the LLC or corporation, spending that little bit of money. There are annual fees involved, but as you're growing your business, I think it's going to become something that's much more important. And also, go ahead, Melyssa.
To clarify on that point, you're saying if you're a sole proprietor or solopreneur right now and you don't have an LLC or a corporation formed at the moment, it's important to do that with GDPR potentially, because if you do, let's say, get sued, if you are a sole proprietor, they could come after like your house, your car, your personal assets. But if you're an LLC, they can't come after your personal stuff. They can come after your money for your business and your business assets, but it protects your personal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just think if you looked at that issue and you thought, no, I'm fine just staying a sole proprietor or staying a general partnership or some other things without an LLC, I think you need to just look at it again. And then the flip side of that, the other way we protect from potentially being sued and having damages is insurance. And so I do think it's time, if you don't have a general business insurance policy, to look into that, and then to make sure that it's actually going to cover this kind of thing. Because not all insurance policies cover everything, and cybersecurity and breaches and those kinds of things are really often excluded. So again, if you're a tiny company, you're not handling much data, maybe it's not worth it, but I think it's at least you need to look at it and consider, is it time to reevaluate that?
Got it. Okay. Sherry had a question about the LLC. If you form an LLC, do you lose the pass-through benefits of the recent tax changes in the U.S.?
So I am not a CPA.
Yeah.
So I always say, when you're looking at this, you want to talk to a tax professional, a CPA or an enrolled agent, and a lawyer, because there's two different things to look at: the liability protection and the tax benefits. So my understanding, again, not a CPA, is that most LLCs are treated as pass-throughs. And so that's not going to, the same way a sole proprietor is. So that means you're not taxed on the profits of the business. You're just taxed individually on how the business works. So my understanding is that doesn't change from when you go to sole proprietor to LLC. But talk with a CPA if that's important to you and you want to make sure that you're getting all those benefits.
Got it. Inez says, we were talking about having a privacy policy link on each opt-in form, contact form, et cetera. Would it be enough to have the privacy policy on each page as mobs, like at the bottom kind of area?
No. That is pretty clear in the guidance, that they don't just want it to be hanging out in the footer. They want it to be right up, right where you're asking for the information.
All right. So we have a question from Louise, who said, my web guy who manages my site says that MailChimp has GDPR covered for the list they hold for subscribers. He says that as such, there's nothing more I need to do. I have double opt-ins and privacy policies in place. Is that true?
So if you've been using a double opt-in since day one, then yes, that is true. Your list is compliant. If you've done some of each, then no.
Got it. So if you've already been doing a double opt-in, then you're fine.
Yeah, because you've gotten affirmative consent that they want to be on your list. Now, that double opt-in has to say exactly what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can't say, do you want to get, helpful tips? And then you're actually, sending them 100 sales emails. Or you can't be saying, I'm going to send you emails, and then you're actually using their email to do something totally different. Like sending it to another company. Maybe you have a sister company and you're using it for something different. Like there are ways that you could not be compliant even with the double opt-in.
Right.
But if if you're being clear and straightforward, then you should be fine.
Right. Okay. So Nathan said, what's your opinion on this phrasing for my opt-in form? Join my email list or newsletter, which includes XYZ. As a thank you, you will get this free gift.
I think that works.
Yeah, sounds like it works. Jeffrey has a question or statement. He said, why do you keep saying we have to comply? Isn't it really just a risk-reward situation?
That's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like saying you have to, you shouldn't, or you can't murder people.
Comply with belt. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are laws that say you have to do X, Y, Z, but no one can force you to do it. But there could be penalties.
Yeah, we're kind of getting into like the philosophy of it now. Technically, you don't have to do anything, but there's consequences. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Liza said, so this is part of the regulation that we would have to delete everyone who does not say they want to stay on the list. Yes.
If they're in the EU, yeah.
If they're in the EU.
Or okay. They might be in the EU,
yeah. Jennifer said, my business is an app where people get an account. I understand I can't automatically add them to my newsletter, but is it okay to email them with app updates?
Yeah. So that's part of like, if you need to be in contact with them as part of delivering the service that they signed up for, then that's fine. That's the same as like sending a shipping confirmation or things like that. That's fine.
Mm.
Now, if it's something they have to pay you for, I don't know, there could be like gray areas there.
Okay.
If it's not required to keep it working, like that's one I would definitely want to think about.
Right. Okay. Dina said, does the privacy policy link need to be in the confirmation email for double opt-ins?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
If it wasn't, because that's where you're getting consent, and it needs to be where you're getting the consent.
Right. Okay. Sophia said, can we keep our existing opt-in forms and just have the email, so I think the double opt-in email, have a link to subscribe to more emails?
Yeah.
So you don't have to go change everything. You could keep, it sounds like you could keep your form exactly the same if it just says like sign up to get this freebie. And then the email, you could explain a little bit more and have them maybe click a link to.
Yeah, I do think you will need that privacy policy link though on all your forms.
On your forms. Okay.
My guess is that's going to become really easy to do across the board.
Yeah. I bet.
Apps. Like I think that hopefully will be a universal change where you don't have to go.
Right. Opt-in form creators are just going to make that like a thing.
Oh, fingers crossed.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. So Gina said, what about customers I add to my email list when they purchase an e-course? If they consent to course-related emails, do I have to get separate consent to add to my general mailing list? Yeah, we talked about that earlier. They do. All right. Karina said, I send an email sequence right now to people who have started a cart but not purchased. Is that a problem at this point?
So I guess she's getting their email because they enter it and then don't finish checking out.
Yeah. How does that normally work?
Yeah.
I think that's how it works.
I think that's not going to be okay because you don't have their consent to contact them.
Mm-hmm. It would need to be like they're already on your list and have confirmed.
Yeah, maybe if you could do that. Yeah. I wonder if you had one page of the checkout process that's just the email, and then you say something like, I don't know how this would work as a practical matter. Like, yes, I agree. You can email me if I forget to finish.
Yeah.
That's one that could take some brainstorming. There may be a way to do it.
Yeah.
I want to think about it more.
Yeah. Okay.
I like to problem solve. I hate to tell people you even though I've said it a lot during this call, but that you can't do this or you have to do that. I think there's often creative ways to figure things out.
Totally. Yes. Okay. I think we talked about this. Kelly said, I didn't think you could hold your content upgrade hostage to get them on your email list. I thought if you offer a content upgrade, you have to give that without the requirement that they be added to your list to get the content upgrade. And I think that's the case that we talked about.
Yeah, earlier. I think so. And I think the trick is going to be where you try to do the 2-for-1. I think that's something that we're going to have to figure out. Does that rule, or is there a way that you can word it exactly the right way? That's where we're going to see some movement there.
Right. Which it sounds like you could really just insert and get emails from me, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And then you're agreeing to both.
Right. You're agreeing to both. Okay. So we've got a few more questions here. And if you all have any final questions as you're watching this, just let me know. Type them into the chat. So Dina, just to confirm, she said, do I need to reconfirm my list if I've always used a double opt-in? We just answered that. And Autumn was basically saying, no, you don't. But if you're using their data in some other way, like for Facebook ads or in another way that you weren't before, you just need to be upfront and get them to reconfirm for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're using your list or your CRM to do retargeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
Your group has great questions, Melyssa.
I know. I'm learning so much from their questions too. You all are so smart. kind of more of a philosophical question from Amy, but she said, why is this happening for email and online stuff? Is this going to change for things that we get in the mail because of all of the unwanted coupons and random mail that she gets from companies? Is it going to change for things like that too?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen any writing on that. So that's interesting. This is pretty much, it's not limited to online data. It's like anybody who uses or stores data.
Okay.
So it could, I'm trying to look at the way it's written. I mean, anyone who collects, uses, stores, or received any personally identifiable data is how it's written. Yeah, I don't know is my answer. It's a good question. It's something I'll look into.
Okay. Perfect. Cami said, if I don't know where my contacts are located or from, should I ask them in the re-engagement emails, or is that in violation of the location discrimination piece of the GDPR?
Yeah, you can ask, but then what you do with that information, you can't then discriminate against them. So you can use it to figure out, how you can comply with GDPR and what your obligations are. But you can't say, only these people are going to get XYZ. That's my understanding, at least so far.
Okay. Cheryl said, when it says consent can't be a precondition of signing up for a service, why not? What if our service requires that technology?
So I think if you have to have their information to do the thing that they've asked you to do, then that's okay. But I think you can't say that they have to consent to you marketing to them to sign up for your service. Does that make sense? It's a little different.
Yeah. You're giving them,
or like using your data for something totally different. Like,
right.
And I'll give this example, even though it's not really relevant to probably anybody here, but we have a lot of new Internet of Things companies. So like my thermostat, I can now operate from my phone. And there's a, I don't know, data collection center somewhere that facilitates that happening, that allows my phone to communicate with my thermostat. And so they're gathering all that data about how often I turn my thermostat up and how often I turn it down. And there's same things like now there's smart locks and smart fridges and smart, everything in your house. And so I think what some of these regulations are more aimed towards is things like that, where I sign up on this website so that I can make my thermostat work. And then the thermostat company realizes they're sitting on this treasure trove of data about how people use their thermostats, and they're going to go do something totally different with my data. And so they have to ask me before they can do that. So I think when you look at it with some other context, it can help us understand how this is really going to work.
Right.
And there's like, if you Google, how can I make money from the data in my business? Like there's all kinds of companies trying to figure out how they can sell your data and make money off of your data that you did not consent to. In theory, that should all be anonymous. And like, I don't really care if anybody knows how often I turn up and down my thermostat, but like, there could be other things that I do care about.
Yeah.
I use an Wi-Fi camera in my daughter's room to look at her in her crib. Like, I don't really want people accessing that data.
Right. Do you think that this law was created for kind of that reason, for making it harder for companies to sell data, and also for just protecting against if a breach does happen, making sure that their citizens are protected?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a huge change in Europe with what we have seen, which is things like Facebook, where it's a free platform, but it's free because they use your data and they make money from your data. So I think you're going to see that change. And I think you're also going to see a lot of change in, startups and new apps. It's very expensive for them to comply with GDPR. So I think that's going to change. And like, if I'm hiring a vendor to handle data in my business, I'm not going to hire a startup because I'm worried they might not be compliant. I'm going to go with the guy that's been going for a long time, and I know has put in the resources and research to make sure they're compliant.
Right. Especially if you said earlier that you could be liable if a software you use has a data breach and your customers are.
I don't want to take that risk.
Yeah.
So I think there are going to be some serious consequences. There's upsides and downsides to every change.
Right. Okay, so you're amazing. This is incredibly valuable. I just have a few more questions from people, if that's okay with you.
No problem.
Okay, so Nathan says for the first example with the freebie, I think he asked this earlier, how clear should the double opt-in confirmation be? Usually the default is confirm your subscription in that double opt-in email they get. Do we need to be extra clear?
I would add a sentence saying what they're confirming.
Right, okay. So Catherine said, is Google Analytics considered cookies?
It is.
Yeah. So you need to have that statement on your website to make sure that they're confirming that they allow you to collect cookies. Or
yeah. I don't
confirming
earlier, but your IP address is considered personally identifiable data. Mm-hmm. So I have seen some things that maybe Google is anonymizing those where you're only getting a snippet of it. So that I think this is going to be changing in the next weeks and months as everyone's kind of figuring out. So, Google Analytics might be a problem today and it might not require a cookie banner in a month. Like, it's just hard to say.
Right. Okay.
You've got to look at what apps and tools you're using in your business.
Right. Okay. Christy said, in your privacy policy statement, can you say something like, by entering your email anywhere on this site, you are agreeing to be added to my email list to receive the newsletter updates and special offers?
I mean, that your privacy policy, the page has to be a lot more than that, but that would be fine with your opt-in form if that's what she's asking.
Okay, right. So privacy policy needs a bunch more information, but if you're just talking about the little sentence that goes with the opt-in form, that's fine.
But it would need a link to
the whole thing. Got it. Cami said, and this is kind of similar to another question that we just got, is there a reason I shouldn't treat all of my contacts the same? Wouldn't it make my life easier to just treat all contacts as if they were in the EU instead of having to segment and market differently depending on where people are? I think that's kind of what Autumn has been saying, actually.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend moving forward. I think you might consider, if you don't want to narrow your list too much for people who signed up in the past, you could consider doing some segmenting and trying to do it that way. But yeah, right. I think moving forward, it's going to be way easier to just assume, like, treat everybody as if they're in the EU.
Right. Yeah. Especially if other countries start to adopt this policy too, which it seems like makes sense that they would. So just to get everything in place for anybody who could be visiting your site. And then for Susan, just to follow up there, she said, do I send re-engagement emails only to my EU addresses or to everybody? And what we were saying earlier is there's really not a perfect way to know if people are in the EU or not. So really sending it to everybody is a good idea. Cheryl said, what do you think of having 2 links in an email opt-in confirmation message? Something like, please confirm that you want to get the download and get my email newsletter. Or that says, send me the download and newsletter, or no, I don't want the newsletter, just send me the download. So
yeah, I think that's fine if you can do it. We were looking at ours today and there wasn't a way to do that, but it will depend on your provider. If you can do 2, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to do like the one where you get the freebie and then a second email that says, hey, do you want to subscribe to our newsletter?
Got it. Okay. Nicole just saying, in Squarespace, there's an option when setting up the cookie banner to restrict Squarespace analytics. Do I need to tick this box to make my cookie banner compliant?
I'm not sure exactly what that means. What are Squarespace analytics like something they do?
It sounds like, I'm actually not familiar with them either, but it sounds like maybe it's kind of like Google Analytics.
Yeah, if it's like Google Analytics, then I think yes.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure how that works.
Gail said, if you do product giveaways, you need to indicate that you will share the email with the sponsor. Is that correct?
You have to you can't do that. You have to ask their permission to share it with the sponsor.
Yeah. And I think I think this has already been a thing a lot in general. I've seen like summits, for example, where somebody will sign up for a summit and then give the email address to everyone in the summit, which has already been a law that's not legal. You can't do that. Okay.
You could certainly have a giveaway and say like, yes, I want to share my email address with whoever's giveaway.
These 50 people.
You'd have to list them all. Like, you'd have to be really clear about it.
Right. Okay, so there's a few more questions here. Sophia said, I'm really confused about the double opt-in. The first email of the double opt-in will have confirmation of subscription. Then we deliver the freebie in email number 2 because it says in the regulation that you can't do that. You have to deliver the freebie, then ask for confirmation to subscribe. So we've actually talked a lot about this. If you missed any part of the presentation, definitely go back and rewatch the replay we'll send out. But what we were saying is that they can subscribe to your opt-in form for the freebie, and then in that email you send it to them. You can't just like withhold the freebie, but you get them to confirm that they want to be subscribed to all your other stuff in that second email, or first email technically could be.
Yeah. You got to give them the thing.
Yeah, you got to give them the thing. Luthia says, if someone doesn't consent to promotional emails, are we still allowed to send them our emails so long as we don't send them any email containing promotions or offers?
So I think you still have to get their permission to send them informational emails. So you would have to say either on your form, get this freebie or have a checkbox or do a double opt-in into informational emails. You can't just say, download my checklist here, with no indication that they're going to get other emails.
Yeah. So if they confirm that they want to get informational emails, that's fine.
I think so. Yeah. And something we've been working through is like a nurture sequence or an autoresponder sequence, which a lot of us do when someone first joins our list. So it's not necessarily like a weekly newsletter, but it's a series of emails introducing ourselves, telling them how we help people, all of those kinds of things, over a series of days or weeks or months. And I think as long as you're getting permission to send them informational emails, that's fine. That's not really I don't consider that something that you need a separate consent for. I think that falls under their initial consent. But again, it's a bit of a gray area.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much it. I know we have so many questions. I think that we got most of the questions here. Huh?
Hopefully we hit the high points.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much value, so many things. I learned a ton from this too. Brittany said this has been extremely all caps valuable. Autumn has clarified so much for me. I'm still nervous about it, but not panicking anymore. Thank you so much for doing this. Amazing. And so many more comments from people who are just saying, thank you so much for your time today. This has been so valuable. Thank you both so much from Ulrich. Yeah, love it. Thank you so much, Autumn. This has been mind-blowingly helpful. A lot of comments coming in now from people who are just so thankful for your time. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Everyone who came and joined us. I hope this was really valuable for you, that you got a lot out of this too, and that you feel empowered and equipped to work with GDPR in a compliant way. Thank you, Autumn. And if you guys want to go check her out, go to this link on her slide here, awbfirm.com/GDPR. She's got some resources. She also has helped me with some legal stuff in the past for my business. So she's also just a great attorney and can be really helpful to you in your business too. So thank you so much, Autumn.
Yeah, thanks, Melyssa. Y'all have a great day.
You too. All right. Bye, everybody.